It's an industry that's revolutionized every area of entertainment, from television to sports to movies. The video game business rakes in more than $20 billion a year, making bigger bucks than even Hollywood.
In the early 2000s, something remarkable happened. The video game industry brought in more revenue than the movie industry. At this time, video games had only been around for a few decades at most, and most media companies still viewed them as a toy to entertain children and computer nerds. Today, the video game industry is worth more than the movie and music industry combined, and the companies that make these games are some of the most valuable businesses in the world. The only thing is, they don't really make video games anymore. Movie studios are pumping out record numbers of big budget movies, which are being viewed by more people on more platforms, but video game studios are doing the opposite. Rockstar, the creators of the infamous Grand Theft Auto series, used to release a new game every 4 months on average. But as of mid-2022, their latest game is now almost 4 years old, and there is no news of any new releases coming soon. Despite this dry spell, Rockstar's parent company just had its best financial year ever. Why? Well, the reason is simple. Video game companies don't make money producing video games anymore. In fact, game companies will try to do whatever they can to avoid producing new games because their businesses do better the less they make. I think a lot of you are already muttering microtransactions under your breath, but that's only half the story. Video games are a major industry, and their development has become a major business endeavor.
As I said, the industry's on fire. More people have recognized the value of games.
Cyberpunk 2077 cost CD Projekt Red $316 million to produce and market. This is more than only a handful of the biggest budget movies ever. It was also a poorly received video game, which tanked the game company's credibility with their audience and their stock price with their investors.
I'm sorry.
Their 2021 annual earnings report showed that they generated gross sales of $207 million from the title. They may go on to sell more copies as time passes, but so far, this game is shaping up to be a staggering loss for the company.
I and the entire leadership team are deeply sorry for this, and this video is me publicly owning up to that.
Now, you might think I'm cherry-picking a famously bad example, but many game publishers have found themselves investing heavily into AAA game titles only for them to fail upon launch. Fallout 76, Battlefield 2042, and Destiny all being big-budget stinkers. AAA games have become incredibly complex to develop. They now require unique, dedicated work of thousands of people. The more moving parts these publishers try to put into their games, the more chances there are for things to go wrong. The original Halo, produced by a team of around 100 people, was quite substantial. Halo Infinite, which was released 2 decades later, had more than 100 voice actors. Video games becoming more expensive to produce is not, by itself, a problem. An industry this big is always going to have room for massive budgets, but if companies are going to make these investments, they need to be worthwhile.
Shut up and take my money!
Most big budget games, just like most big budget movies, do make money. But despite both being products designed to entertain people, movies and video games are very different. Most people will only ever watch a movie once or twice, whereas video games are designed to be played for hundreds of hours. Video game companies have learned to take advantage of this by selling more and more features to players as they continue to play. These microtransactions, for many titles, have become the primary revenue generator, with actual game sales being a nice little bonus. Some companies have made their games free to play because they know that more online players is more opportunities for them to sell virtual upgrades or cosmetic items on the game's marketplace. Releasing a new version of the game can cannibalize these potential sales as players move over to the new game with the new store. If Rockstar released Grand Theft Auto 6 this year, there is no doubt it would make a ton of money, but it would also reduce revenue coming in from Grand Theft Auto Online, the company's biggest earner. It might still be worth it, but it's a huge risk. The company would need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to produce a new game and run the risk of it being a buggy mess.
It's the same engine, right, that I worked on when I was there, the core of it. It's the same content they've really perfected the systems. Again, there's a beautiful machine there that you'd have to try really hard to fuck up.
Not only can game companies lose a source of revenue from an upgrade, they can also annoy the big spenders who would be left with hundreds of dollars worth of virtual items in an outdated video game. Rockstar would have a choice. Do they A, let people have all the stuff they paid for in Grand Theft Auto 5 and Grand Theft Auto 6, or do they B, make people start from scratch? Option A would mean that their new project is going to miss out on a lot of revenue from people who are happy to spend real-life money to have the coolest stuff the game has to offer. Leaving potential revenue on the table is not going to be popular with the investors that need to greenlight such a large project.
Around GTA 6. So the question is how do we think about remaster and console cycle potentially impacting the timing of GTA 6, and any interest in giving a year right here?
Right, so Rockstar hasn't announced any new titles for the market.
Option B will make the most financially valuable players angry if the new game doesn't have enough new features. They might not take the leap at all and choose to continue playing the old version with all of their stuff. On the topic of new features, putting them into games has become both easier for small projects and harder for larger ones. We have already seen that massively ambitious games chocked full of features where you can do everything have the potential to be massive embarrassments when even a few of these features don't work. The problem big game companies face is that they can't push these large projects without promising something to differentiate them from the long list of titles that already exists. There was a time when new features could be as simple as updated graphics. Gran Turismo games used to make headlines about what at the time looked like photorealistic graphics. Now, game development tools like Unreal Engine give developers access to high-end graphics right out of the box without the need for teams of developers to build a game from scratch. Not only is it harder for big-budget games to distinguish themselves on features, it's harder for them to justify their need at all.
Who said?
The marketing people.
Marketing? I thought we were supposed to have total creative control.
Welcome to the Matrix.
The original Doom launched in 1993, and quickly became the game people thought of when they thought of a combat video game. Less than 10 years later, in 2001, Halo Combat Evolved arguably stole that title and quickly became the most popular first-person shooter ever up until that point.
Shooter should really enjoy the game, as should anyone. Besides being easily the best game of the Xbox launch, it's one of the best first-person shooters ever on any platform.
It was easy to see why. The technology was vastly different, and the overall immersion and enjoyability of the first Halo game was far greater than that of Doom. Now, 20 years later, people are still playing the first Halo game because it really has everything you could ever want in a shooter. Yes, the graphics are obviously dated, but the difference between Combat Evolved and the latest Halo game are significantly smaller than the differences between Combat Evolved and Doom. For many players, the nostalgia and lower hardware requirements of the older game are actually a draw. Companies are forced to get more and more ambitions in order to justify new games, and while technology can make some things possible that simply weren't 20 years ago, it still depends on an ever larger number of human developers to stuff these features into a game.
Video games have changed the course of human evolution to some degree.
When existing games exist that people are already perfectly happy with, they are also going to be far less accepting of any bugs or mistakes made by any of the thousands of developers now involved in bringing these games to life. Alright, so games have become more expensive and riskier to produce. Technology has hit a plateau where there is less need for new games to keep up, and game companies have found new ways to make money much more predictably. Now, I said at the beginning of this video that microtransactions were only half the story behind why game companies could get away with going so long between new big releases. Yes, it's true. If gamers were not happy to spend hundreds of dollars on a single game over many years, these companies would probably be forced to release more games to keep the money rolling in. In fact, the predatory monetization of video games is something I have already made a separate video on. But there is something else that has arguably been an even better business opportunity for the big players in the video game industry, and this is providing tools to other game developers. There is an old saying that if you want to get rich in a gold rush, you don't dig for gold, you sell the shovels. There are thousands of small game studios all trying to make the next PUBG or Fortnite. Some of them will make millions of dollars, and most of them will make very little money at all. Bigger games with more money behind them do have a better chance of making a return on their investment, but that is still digging for gold in a very crowded and competitive marketplace. Valve was once a very successful game studio. Now, producing games is just a side hustle for them, because they make more money running the Steam marketplace.
Why doesn't Valve make games anymore?
Because they don't have to. They have enough money.
They sure
End of the news.
Epic Games also started off as a video game developer, but they have now branched out into running the Epic Game Store, as well as licensing the tools that they use to make their games to other aspiring developers. Unreal Engine costs $1,500 per developer per year. There are 22,000 self-reported video game businesses operating in America. Even if all of these companies had 5 developers each, that is over 100,000 Unreal Engine customers. Unreal Engine currently has 13% market share, meaning that Epic Games could be making $20 million in licensing fees alone, which is actually not that much really. But Epic Games isn't done there. They actually intentionally make their software cheap to use. In many cases, they make it totally free. Why? Because they also charge a 5% royalty fee on any sales a game makes over $1 million. Just like free-to-play games are designed to bring in big spending players, Unreal's free-to-develop model is designed to bring in big earning titles. That 13% market share could be bringing in as much as $650 million from the American game market alone. Epic is a privately held company, so they do not release their financials, but it is estimated that the company earns more than $1 billion a year worldwide from their game engine alone. Some other companies have taken a less technical approach to generate new income streams. Some of the biggest names in gaming, like EA and Ubisoft, have just acquired dozens of smaller game studios. Not only does this share overhead costs amongst lots of different projects, it also makes for much more predictable revenue.
Go buy your mama a house. Go buy your whole family houses. Put this money in your savings account. Go spend some money for no reason. Come back and ask for more.
Instead of putting all of their eggs in one basket, these companies spread the risk out over dozens of studios and hundreds of different titles. Some of them will do well and some of them will fail, but as long as those winners pay for the losers and then some, the business is sound. Managing lots of smaller developers also means that these big companies get exposure to lots of different areas of the gaming market. There's money to be made in hardcore competitive games, story-driven games, social games, and mobile games, but it's impossible to make a game that makes money from all of these markets at once. Unfortunately, big budget games are going to become less and less common. Video games are a business, and businesses need to go where the money tells them to. Candy Crush is one of the highest grossing games of all time, and it was made on an initial budget of less than $1 million.
Tasty.
For as long as customers are content with the games they currently have, and are willing to spend more money on the titles that came out decades ago, game companies are going to avoid taking risks that could sink their entire business. In the late 1990s, the internet was gaining popularity at a rapid rate, and tech enthusiasts were starting to download video game content straight off this new communications platform. In the early days, these pieces of downloadable content, or DLC, were primarily things like fan-made extensions to popular video games and Doom mods. Lots and lots of Doom mods. It was mostly harmless fun amongst a small group of technically proficient gamers and developers. This would change with the introduction of online gaming platforms like MMOs and Microsoft's Xbox Live, which allowed players to make purchases directly over the internet. For the first few years, this was mostly game companies selling subscriptions to play in their virtual worlds or selling small expansion packs online, which wouldn't justify a new game release in their own right. The pushback was minimal, and most players were actually excited to be able to pay $4 or $5 to get an extra few hours worth of gameplay without having to go to GameStop to buy an entirely new game. This was until 2006, when Bethesda, the developer of the Elder Scrolls series, released DLC which added nothing to the game other than armor for your in-game horse. This $2.50 optional download in a single-player game was the first time that players actively pushed back at the idea of paying money for pixels that otherwise added nothing to the game. Despite the negativity, the horse armor became the 9th best-selling DLC for the Elder Scrolls game, beating out entire expansion packs which took thousands of hours in development time to produce. By contrast, the horse armor was just a 3D model which took a 3D artist an afternoon to put together. Other gaming studios saw this success, and 18 years later, most of the money made by the $180 billion gaming industry comes from sales made after the customer has already purchased the game. This might seem harmless to most of you watching. You might even think it's a good way to subsidize the cost of development, making video games cheaper for people who are not interested in these in-game purchases. But these seemingly harmless pixels are being knowingly exploited to prey on some of the most vulnerable people in our society. Video game developers are companies with a profit motive, and in many instances, shareholders who they need to keep happy. Selling a game once is great, but it means there is a set amount of money that can be made from a set amount of games. Exceptions do exist. Somehow I have managed to buy Skyrim for the PS3, PS4, and PC, but I don't like to talk about it. The problem here is that some people are only willing to spend $20 a month on video games where other people are happy to spend thousands. You could try to charge thousands of dollars for your game, but unfortunately, not many people would be willing to pay that price. The only way to truly maximize profit is to get every possible gamer to pay the maximum possible amount that they are individually willing to pay for the game. That's impossible to achieve with a direct sale. A GameStop employee can't be expected to look over someone's financial records before setting an asking price for a copy of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, so you need to be smarter. What you need to do is offer a game that gets slightly better the more you pay for it. If you want to get really crafty, you can make the game itself free to download and play, but lock big advantages behind in-game transactions. Your free version of Clash of Clans is probably a perfectly fine game, but you will be destroyed by another dude that drops $2,000 a month upgrading his base. It might be annoying for you, but it's great for the game company. Most people only play their game because it's free. Some might throw in a few bucks to pay for a premium subscription. And then there are a few hundred so-called whales that drop $1,000 a month to make sure they are the most powerful players possible. This game extracted the maximum possible amount of money out of everybody that plays it. The game developers aren't even worried about all the players who aren't even paying them a cent. They might cost them a small marginal amount for server hosting, but they are offering back something far more valuable. They are the entertainment for the whales who are paying thousands of dollars a month. Someone isn't going to keep paying more money to upgrade their weapons if they can't use them to absolutely dominate some poor kid who thought they would just try out a free mobile game. Business students call this price skimming, where businesses will alter their prices for the same product for different people in order to maximize profits. Gamers call this pay to win. Monetization in games takes on a few different forms. The best type of game in the gamer's eye is a game that is free with no outlets for monetization at all. The problem is, of course, that this doesn't generate any revenue for whoever put the time and effort into developing the game. That doesn't mean that these games don't exist though, and I salute the dedicated souls behind them. The next step down from there are games that are free to play that sell game items that make cosmetic changes only. A new hat for your character or a dapper new outfit. It doesn't improve your stats in the game, but it's cool to look at, and some people are happy to pay some money for the outfits, which keeps the game financed. Pretty good trade if you ask me. One worse than that is games that you need to pay for up front, but also offer cosmetic items. Again, these items don't give you any special advantage over other players in the game, but if you've already paid $60 for a video game, you might not like having more shit marketed to you in the game itself. Worse again are free games that have in-game advantages for sale. Mobile games are notorious for this. You can download Rise of Warship Legends for free, but if you want to be competitive against other players, you are almost forced into paying money to skip arbitrary timers and unlock powerful items. The absolute worst are games that you need to pay for, but still offer in-game advantages for money. When EA released Star Wars Battlefront, they were met with moderate resistance for locking characters like Darth Vader behind real cash paywalls or obscenely difficult in-game challenges. But what's the actual harm here? It might make some games a little bit less fun, but it's not like anybody is forcing you to play them. Well, the harm comes to the people that unfortunately already do. A 2018 report by Daniel King of the Society for the Study of Addiction has reported that video game addiction is very real, and that addiction is being preyed upon by game companies to extract a lot of money out of a surprisingly small group of people. Whales is a term typically used by casinos to describe patrons that gamble significant amounts of money. The casinos will cater to these high rollers in any way that they can so they keep coming back and losing more money at the tables. Whales in video games are just the same, and video game companies cater to them in the same way. You want to feel like an absolute badass? Drop $200 on in-game gems that will let you crush any opponent, except for maybe the guy that spent $500 on gems. The report explains that this rewards your brain by tricking it into believing that purchasing in-game items is just part of skillful gameplay. This becomes all the more sinister when the game companies spend years refining their systems to maximize this effect on your brain. Perhaps nowhere is this clearer to see than in the loot box. For those of you who don't know, a loot box is a collective term given to in-game purchases that offer out random items. This means that a player could spend money on an in-game purchase and not get the item that they really wanted. They may not get any item of value at all. Loot boxes add this element of chance into this toxic cocktail of predatory monetization, which can lock even the most pragmatic players into a loop of trying just one more spin to try and get that super rare character. The next tool that these companies will use to their advantage is the player base themselves. Online games are meant to be social. For many serious gamers, they spend more time with their online friends than they do interacting with the people in the real world, especially during the pandemic. There are 3 types of people that gamers will meet in these games. Players that are better than them because they spend a lot of money, players that are worse than them but will offer an ego boost to the gamer who did spend a lot of money, and peers who have been conditioned by the game to not think too critically about dropping a few $100 for a slight in-game advantage. Humans are both social and competitive beings. Gamers are on average more isolated than non-gamers, so when they get the chance to spend a little cash to flex in the social setting that they spend the most time in, most of them will take it. All of these people, without even realizing it, will be pushing each other to spend more money in-game, which is a big reason why some of the most profitable games in the world are free. The final tool is big data. Since most of these games are played online, the developers have one final advantage in the battle to extract cash from their customers' pockets. It's impossible for a gamer to know more about the game than the game company knows about them. Anybody who has played these types of games will be able to attest to the very confusing currency systems in the game. Some games will have multiple different currencies to collect: gems, coins, pearls, and they will all be used to unlock different things in the game. A coin might be used to pay for armor, but you will need pearls to unlock special spells, and cosmetic outfits can only be paid for with gems. Many people have compared this to casinos giving players poker chips instead of letting them play with actual money, because people don't experience the same emotional response handing over a $100 poker chip as they would with a $100 bill. This is no doubt part of the strategy, but I think in-game tokens are worse, because while poker chips have a clear face value, these games make it really hard to work out how much value you are actually getting out of an in-game purchase, because it introduces an exchange rate. The last thing you want to be doing while enjoying a game is exchange rate math. Because of this, game companies can present tailored offers to gamers to maximize the chances that they go and pull out their credit card. Activision and EA both have patents on their microtransaction systems, and they keep them so closely guarded because they are the primary revenue generator for these 2 ginormous public companies. These companies want to form habits. A player who spends $100 every week is worth far more than a player who spends $1,000 just once. This also slowly allows players to fall into the biggest trap of all time: the sunk cost. A game company is likely to make a very modest offer with a big reward first. If the gamer decides to purchase that offer, all subsequent offers will become gradually more expensive with declining true in-game value. Remember, this is made intentionally hard to keep track of because of the different in-game currencies the developers use. By the time the gamer realizes what has happened, they might have spent thousands of dollars on a video game that they thought they would be playing for free. At that point, there is no point in putting the game down because they have already sunk so much time and effort into playing this game that it would be silly to stop now. A lot of these video game whales are not wealthy either. On the contrary, the report found that a lot of these purchases were paid for with debt that the gamer had no way of paying back. So what are you to do when you have mounting debt and a partner that is angry at you for spending your grocery money on a virtual battleship? You look for an escape, of course. And what better escape exists than an online universe filled with your enthusiastic friends who all think that you're a hero because you unlocked the Ultra Mega Sword, which you could upgrade right now to the Giga Ultra Mega Sword for just $29.99. preying on habitual addictive behavior from socially isolated people who just want a platform to socialize on is extremely unethical. Every bit as unethical as a casino without even offering the chance for these players to make any of their money back. I think it's only right to follow up a video about video games being turned into major financial commitments with another video about major financial commitments being turned into video games. The growth and popularity of zero-commission brokerages has allowed many first-time investors to enter the market without having to pay costly brokerage fees that would have made their investments pointless in the first place. Before platforms like Robinhood, the industry standard for stockbrokers was to charge a fixed price for every trade made on both the buy and the sell side, normally 1 to 2% for orders over $5,000. The business model usually included minimum brokerage fees that could be as high as $50 per trade, so someone who only wanted to invest $100 a month would instantly be down 50% on their position the instant they entered the market. They would also lose another 50% of their initial investment when they exited the market because brokerage fees were charged on both the buy and the sell side. Stockbrokers got a bad reputation for encouraging their clients to trade as much as possible, often based off dubious stock picks, all in order to get as many trades through their desk as possible, because more trades meant more fees and more commissions for the individual brokers on the other end of the telephone. This is what was depicted in one of the early scenes of The Wolf of Wall Street, where Jordan Belfort was a rookie on the trading floor. His job was to try and connect licensed financial brokers like Matthew McConaughey with high net worth investors so that the brokers could talk them into making a trade and collecting their fee along the way. When Belfort went to his job interview at Investor Center and talked about making 1% commission at LF Rothschild, that's what he was referring to.
What do you get on a blue chip stock?
I make 1%. I did make 1%.
Pink Sheets, it's 50.
The fees that stockbrokers charged were high, but at the time, they were not entirely unreasonable in the days before automated trading settlements. Back then, the client's buy or sell instructions had to be given to individual traders on the actual stock trading floors of exchanges around the country, so it made sense that clients covered these costs with some margin so that the brokers could still turn a profit by providing this service.
It's 50%? 50% commission?
Yep.
For what?
It's our markup for our services.
But then came along automated settlement, which meant that now buy and sell orders don't interact with humans at all apart from the people on either end of the trade. Cutting out all the people in the process reduced the expense of facilitating stock trades, which allowed brokers like Robinhood to come along and offer trades completely for free. For most traders, commission-free brokerages are a much better alternative to the better traditional brokerages that for some reason still think it's fair to charge normal retail traders fees of up to 2%. But they are also not charities. The major commission-fee trading platforms are multi-billion-dollar companies, which means they have found other sneakier ways to extract money from their clients. There are several hidden costs to using these platforms, which means that just like the Jordan Belfort-style stockbrokers of yesteryear, they're making money off novice investors every time they trade. And the more trades they get people to do, the more money they make. The only thing that has really changed between then and now is how they make their money and the strategies they are implementing to get people to trade as much as possible. And that's by turning the whole process of investing into a giant game, where instead of making diligent and consistent contributions to a well-thought-out portfolio, investors will instead play for high scores and compete with confetti animations while using financial instruments that they should not reasonably have access to.
Round 1. Fight!
You have probably heard the phrase, if something is free, you are the product, and that's certainly true of most commission-free brokerages. One of the main ways that these companies make money is by routing order flow through major institution partners like market makers. How this works is that when you place a trade, the broker would usually go to the exchange the stock you are trading is listed on. For example, if you wanted to buy a share of Disney, the broker would go to the New York Stock Exchange and try and find someone selling a share of Disney. The price that you can go out and instantly buy a share of Disney at, the offer price, is always going to be higher than the price you can sell a share of Disney at, which is the bid price. What some brokers have started doing is instead of going all the way to the exchange, they go to their institutional partners to fill the order at the price matching the offer price if their client is buying, or the bid price if the broker customer is selling. These partners will create their own little market with these buys and sells. That little market is something called a dark pool. It's called a dark pool because it's a market that manages buy and sells of publicly listed assets, but nobody outside the firm running the dark pool can see what's going on inside. Dark pools might conjure up some images of evil financiers secretly controlling the world's finances in secretive shady markets, and there are definitely people that would have you believe this is the case. But all a dark pool lets these companies do is make the difference between the bid and offer price every time they facilitate a trade. For a major company like Disney, the spreads between the bid and offer or ask price will be very low. sometimes just a fraction of a penny, so there isn't much money to be made there. But companies with lower trading volumes will have much bigger spreads, advanced financial instruments like options will have even bigger spreads, and options with low trading volumes like Wall Street Bet's favorite out-of-the-money call options will have the highest spreads of all, sometimes as much as 20% of the price of the option. Without these market makers, some of the more degenerate trades that people utilizing platforms like Robinhood want to make might never get filled. But for the price that people pay for that liquidity, these institutions almost act like a casino. They facilitate games of chance where they have a slight edge with every trade. Because being able to accept trades with the margin already in their favor is so lucrative, these market makers will pay the brokers a handsome commission to be the first in line to receive these trades, a practice known as payment for order flow. There is nothing necessarily wrong with this practice. The broker still has a fiduciary duty to find the most competitive price in the market to execute their client's trade at. So if they could find a better deal at the public exchange, they are obligated to do it. But that doesn't stop them asking a market maker if they want to match that price first. For an investor that is only making 1 or 2 trades every month, this hidden cost will be almost imperceptible. It can also increase the speed in which trades are processed. There have been some controversies like Robinhood's halting of GameStop purchases during the famous short squeeze of 2020, a move that the company claimed was to protect new investors during the period of market exuberance.
We always remain focused on making sure the system is reliable, that we're investing in stability, making sure we're up for customers when they need us the most.
Robinhood made some of their revenue from financial firms that were short GameStop, making many believe that they halted trading to keep their biggest financial contributors happy.
Now, for everyone involved in this was a gamble. This was not investment.
Whether you think this revenue model is designed to exploit investors by giving market power to a few powerful hedge funds, or if you think it's just a clever way to subsidize free trades for investors, the indisputable truth is that the more trades people make and the more exotic the financial instrument being traded, the more money the brokerages will make. So they have a business interest in getting people to make as many trades as possible. The average rate of return of the S&P 500 over the past 100 years has been approximately 10%. By all means, a great return that can compound to grow sizable fortune if combined with a diligent savings plan. A 10% annual return will double the size of a portfolio every 7 years before even considering any extra contributions. But to a lot of people, that's not good enough, which is why they turn to more volatile tools like options, which have the potential to double the size of a portfolio in a single day. But do you know what the average annual rate of return for a diversified portfolio of options is? It's 0%, or less than 0% after the market spread is accounted for. Options are not an investing tool, they are a risk management tool. But if people knew that, they would be much less likely to play with them. Instead, brokers have started promoting their options trading utilities as a selling point, and have made getting into extremely risky trades very simple. Everything down to the design of many commission-free brokerages is designed to make it as unintimidating as possible so people feel comfortable playing the markets like they would playing a video game. I am all for letting people do what they want to do with their own money, provided that the risks are properly disclosed, which in many cases they aren't. So I guess I will do it for them. These are 4 ways in which the gamification of investing is costing average investors money. The first way is by getting them to invest more often than they would if the process properly reflected the seriousness of the financial actions their clients were making. Some people should simply not be investing in the market at all. Most financial commentators that talk about the hidden costs of commission-free brokerages will round out their argument with a point about how it's still good that these platforms are giving smaller investors access to the market, but this is really only half true. If someone is absolutely committed to putting $100 into the market every month, a commission-free brokerage is definitely the best way for them to do that, so they aren't losing a good chunk of their investment to broker's fees. However, I'm going to get a little bit controversial here, and say that someone who can only spare $100 a month to invest probably shouldn't be investing in the stock market. That money would better be spent contributing to an emergency fund, learning a new skill that could make them additional income, or simply paying down debt. A 2020 article found that 42% of Robinhood and 41% of TD Ameritrade users had FICO scores below 650, which suggests very bad creditworthiness caused by a history of not paying off financial obligations. If someone is paying 20% interest on a credit card that they are trying to get rid of, the contributions they make to their portfolio are going to end up costing them even more money because they are not going to be able to make 20% annual returns consistently unless they are the next Warren Buffett. But then again, Warren Buffett didn't start off with credit card debt. I know it sounds like I'm gatekeeping by saying that it's only for people who already have lots of money, but I promise that's absolutely not the case. It's just important for people to realize that investing isn't automatically good, and people need to assess their personal financial situation before making investments to work out not only if it will make them money, but also if there are better, safer ways for them to make more money. Gamified platforms with fancy graphics, leaderboards, giveaways, and emphasis on trendy stocks make it easy and emotionally rewarding to drop money into an account and just start playing with it. Compare this to an old-school fee-based broker like Schwab. You know, the one that the boomers with real money use, and the percentage of accounts with FICO scores below 650 falls to just 33%. The intimidating and serious nature of the platform in conjunction with paying upfront fees serves to stop people that shouldn't be making stock investments from those that should be making stock investments. The second way that the gamification of investing hurts investors is that it encourages them to take on riskier positions in order to try to maximize their score, whether that be talking about how their returns beat Ray Dalio or their losses topped Bill Hwang. I've been picking on the brokers a lot so far because they are definitely silently encouraging this kind of behavior, but the rise of online groups like Wall Street Bets and the endless list of TikTok stock pickers deserves their share of blame as well. Good investing should be boring, and it should be just like the plumbing in your house, working quietly in the background to get what it needs to get done. It's important to have a basic idea of how it all works, or at least know a good professional that can set things up for you. If you watch hours of content about how to improve the plumbing in your home and then try all the new tricks out yourself, you are probably going to make things worse. I know that sounds dumb, but for some reason people do exactly the same thing with their finances. The third way that the gamification of investing hurts investors is that it reduces the amount of time that they stay in their positions. We all know that a diversified portfolio is important for building long-term wealth, but what's just as important as the diversity of what is being held within the portfolio is the diversity of the time horizon it's held over. Investing in good times and bad times makes sure that you are never getting in at the top or the bottom of the market. The average return of the market is roughly 10% per year, but a study by Dalbar Inc., a company that studies investor behavior, found that the average investor was only generating returns of 4.25%. The leading cause of this shortfall was that investors would move in and out of positions frequently instead of adopting the long-term buy and hold strategy that would give them market returns. A similar study by QuiverQuant, a market analysis company using Robinhood's public API feeds, found that the average Robinhood user was even worse off, trailing market returns by 6.2%. If you make something a game, people are going to want to play it. But chasing meme stocks and high return option plays is going to hurt people over the long term. Even if we take the investor only making $100 worth of contributions every month, 6.2% compounded annually with those contributions over 40 years, that's $196,000 worth of lost wealth they are missing out on. Part of the reason that people so easily fall into the trap of making all or nothing plays with their investments is that they realize that everything has become unaffordable and that even the most diligent investment plan will not let them achieve their financial goals. The only hope becomes making risky plays that they know won't work out, if only for that 1 in a million chance that they become the next GameStop or Dogecoin millionaire. If that was a bit depressing for you, then my video on why you are never going to retire should cheer you right back up again.